Hello everyone, thanks for coming along today. My name's Aletheia Casey. I'm the course leader for the online MAP-JD, Masters of Photojournalism and Documentary Photography degree. So I run the online part-time mode of study which Ed will tell you more about later in the full-time mode, but I'm on the part-time mode. Very briefly about me, I've been a photographic practitioner for about over 20 years now, and I've been teaching for over 10 years. I've recently taken over the running of the course, of the online course, and I look forward to talking with you more at the end of this group of slides. If you have any questions, I'll go through any of those with you after this little presentation. So back to you, Ed.
Okay, so I am not Max Horton, but I've included Max's slide because she is the course leader for the full-time in college version of the course, primarily a writer and a curator. This is one of the books she co-wrote for Thames and Hudson about female photographers. So I'm here speaking on Max's behalf. This is me. My name's Edmund, Ed Clarke. I've been working, probably now for about 25 years, if not a bit longer. Had a career which has kind of spanned working in editorial photography, as well as working as a commission photographer for design agencies and broadcasters and political parties. But then my kind of practice developed more into longer term projects, which I've tended to share and disseminate in book form and exhibitions. So I've made work about two kind of key areas. One is contemporary conflict, hidden processes of contemporary conflict, and experiences of incarceration. I've had work in solo shows in museums and held in collections in national collections in the UK and America and abroad. I have gallery representation in London and Europe and America. So I kind of span a range of different aspects of practice and experience as a photographer working in editorial and documentary practice. A little bit about UAL, so University of the Arts London, is 6 colleges in one university. So it's kind of a lot of the old London art schools joined together to form one university. So London College of Communication was the London College of Printing, then there was Central St Martin's, Chelsea College of Art, London College of Fashion, Camberwell College of Art, Wimbledon, all got together to form the University of the Arts London. Which is a very big university with a very diverse body of students and staff from over 130 countries, with about 18,000 students each year. The London College of Communication is where MAP-JD is run from. As I say, it used to be called the London College of Printing, now the London College of Communication. And this is the kind of mission statement for our college. We enable students to develop skills needed to succeed as future-facing creatives. And the college is made up of 3 main schools of study: the design school, the media school, and the screen school. And MAP-JD comes under the auspices of the media school. And here's kind of the range of different subject areas covered by the media school: communications and media, journalism and publishing, and then photography. And the MA in documentary photography and photojournalism is one of 3 MA photography based courses on offer in the media school. So let's go into some detail about the course itself. MA Photojournalism and Documentary Photography. This is the part of the text from the course handbook about what it is that we try to achieve on the course, uniting rigorous research with an expansive photographic practice. The course will help you extend your photographic vision to create powerful stories that resonate with your audience and transcend disciplinary boundaries. I think we are very keen to try and help you learn about, understand and experience what photojournalism and documentary photography mean in the context of contemporary photographic and visual communication practice. So the course will give you a grounding in kind of the histories and the classic subjects of photojournalism and documentary photography, but will also expose you and challenge you and invite you to explore kind of what is happening now in terms of what's available with technology, what's happening in contemporary art practice, what's happening in contemporary documentary practice, to really kind of ground you in as contemporary a situation as possible, so that when you move on from the college into the outside world, you have a really good grounding and understanding of what the world is for documentary photography. In terms of postgraduate level study, you know, these are MA courses. You would be postgraduates. This is typically what is expected for the in-college full-time course. So you would have in college roughly 9 to 12 hours of contact per week over 2 to 2.5 days. The course cohort is usually about 30 students per year, can be slightly lower, can be slightly higher, and the course is a balance of theory and practice. So you are there to kind of engage in creative practical development, but also there is a strong element of kind of theory and academic practice and research behind everything.
And I'll just go through the hours for the online part-time course. Face-to-face, we have between 6 and 8 hours per week. When I say face-to-face, it is very much like we are doing now, except that I can't see you. Obviously, I could see you if we were in a tutorial or lecture situation, but we have online sessions, which are always live sessions. The lectures are recorded, so you can have access to those lectures and you can go back later and rewatch the lectures. We also have live tutorials, which I'll go through a little bit later with you as well, which are not recorded, but this makes up to around 6 to 8 hours of an online study per week. Plus, it's expected that you would do roughly the same in your own time of online, of practical and theoretical work. A lot of students who do this course, the online course, are working part or full-time and have families and other kinds of commitments, but it is good to know roughly how many hours to put aside for this particular type of study. Although it is part-time, we do teach mostly during the British working week as well, so you can count on most lectures and classes being between 10 AM and 6 PM, with an occasional after hours tutorial or class of choice. But for your own organisation, it is good to know that they are generally within the British working week. I also just wanted to add to Ed's lovely introduction about the course that I think one of the beautiful, unique and special parts of the course is that we're constantly reevaluating and questioning what photojournalism is and documentary practice is within a modern day context, and ethical representation and positioning of us as photographers and who we are within our own photographic practice and how our working methodology fits within the wider social context. And really importantly, we also place a lot of emphasis on what we as photographers want our work to do within a wider social, within the wider world and the wider kind of social arena. And so all of these things you're encouraged to consider and think about on both the online and full-time course during the time you're studying with us. And then you're also really encouraged and pushed to question and push those boundaries and question where your practice sits within that kind of realm of photojournalism and documentary practice. Thanks, Ed.
Cool. Okay. So the structure of the two courses. Both courses follow the same unit structure, which we've set out here. So, for example, on the full-time course, in the first term, you would be doing the first 2 units at the same time, your photojournalism and documentary practice and histories and theories of photojournalism and documentary photography. And actually, kind of just going back to what Aletheia just said, the way that these units are set out and the way the course is structured, we're trying to take you through a kind of an experience which goes from looking at some of the historical subjects of documentary photography all the way through to giving you the chance to work with other people, to reflect on your subjectivity, to experiment, to explore, so that by the time you come to your major project, you've kind of had a chance to look at a whole different range of practices, ways of seeing, you understand different forms of gaze, and you kind of really get a sense of where you are in relation to your subject and what it is you're trying to say for your audience for the major project. So, for example, in the first term, the photojournalism and documentary practice unit on the full-time course is looking at some of the key subjects of photography, like the self, like relationships, like the portrait, like sense of space, sense of place, and you work on weekly, twice weekly assignments as though you were kind of following the traditional model of being commissioned as a photographer, given a brief which you have to go out and fulfill. And we spend a lot of time looking at issues or ideas of narrative and sequencing. So we're kind of getting a sense of how forms like the photo essay or the photo series work. We're really trying to kind of encourage you to think about how to edit your photographs to form a sequence, to form a narrative, which is saying something to an audience. That runs concurrently with the histories and theories of photojournalism and documentary photography, which looks at some of the key issues and dilemmas is the wrong word, but some of the key concerns of how you operate as a photographer. Aletheia referred to kind of ideas of ethics and ideas of subjectivity, which are key. So you look in that unit at some of the key ethical situations you have to encounter and think about and deconstruct and understand as a photographer to really appreciate your reason for looking at a subject and how you're doing it. You look at some of the classic issues of kind of gaze, the colonial gaze, the male gaze. You look at different ways in which the image has been constructed and controlled, and who is controlling it, who is making it, and what are they making images of, and how does that relationship work for the people who are appearing in the frames of the people making those photographs. So those two first units kind of work very closely hand in hand to give you quite a crash course in issues and practice of photojournalism and documentary photography. Aletheia, do you want to kind of take the next two units?
Absolutely. So following on from those two units, all students then go to do the collaborative unit and what we call the rethink unit, which run at the same time as each other. It's worth noting that the timing of these units are different for the full-time and the online course. Obviously, the online course is 2 years, spread out over 2 years, while the full-time course is 14 months, I believe, Ed, is that correct?
Yes, it is, yeah.
So the collaborative unit is a really exciting unit, I find, because it is a very, very wide open unit in which students are asked to collaborate with an individual, organisation. It could be, for example, a writer, a photographer, or an artist, or an institution also. It's a really exciting exciting subject rather, in which students are really challenged to consider how they work collaboratively, and this includes with people like book publishers, multimedia artists, as I mentioned, writers, or other creative practitioners. It's also a unit which really questions our role as a photographer and the traditional way of working, which was often a solo photographer in perhaps conflict zones or other areas, looking outwardly from ourselves towards a subject. And it's very much about changing that relationship between photographer and subject into a much more collaborative process where students are asked to reflect and consider their working practices and how they relate to the people who they're collaborating with. In conjunction with that unit, we have the Rethink unit, which is really one of my favorite units, actually, I have to say. It's a really fascinating unit where everybody on the unit is asked to completely rethink their working methodology and their working practice. For example, if a photographer feels that they have not really investigated or fulfilled one area of their practice and they feel that they would like to, they're really encouraged to reconsider, reflect, and make work which fulfills and explores an area of their practice which perhaps was unexplored or unthought of before. We've had really fascinating projects produced in the past, perhaps from people that may have worked in conflict zones, for example, completely rethinking that way of working and turning the lens in a very different direction, perhaps to work in a much more introspective way, or perhaps to turn their lens even in on themselves and create self-portraiture and different ways of looking at their own work and producing work. It's a very explorative unit where we really encourage people to explore widely and broadly, and to really reflect throughout the entire process on what does work in their working methodology and their own practice and what perhaps does not. So it's a very reflective unit, and one in which really quite remarkable work has been produced in the past. And from my personal experience, and I'll talk a little bit more about myself a little later, actually I also did this online course that I will tell you a bit about in a moment, but it really made me reconsider my entire practice, which now, 9 years after studying this unit, has continued on today, where I continually rethink, reevaluate, and reconsider my own practice. So it's had an incredible impact on me personally, and I know it also does on most of the students who also do this unit. Ed, did you want to talk a little about the next two?
Yeah, I'll just also kind of reflect on the kind of where these two units fit in the overall experience, because certainly by the time you get to rethink, this is your first opportunity, what you're asked to really go into a subject you've chosen for yourself in great depth, and it does kind of relate to the fifth unit there, which is the research project, which is actually a new unit. Previously, Rethink was known as documentary practice with research methods, and what we're really kind of asking you to do is to understand why you're making work about a subject by researching it, living with it, reading about it, talking to people about it, talking to people who are the subject that you're involved with, so that the form you choose to make that work comes from that research. So rather than just by default picking up your camera and as a photographer always working in the same way, it's really kind of asking you to think and expand your way of working, as Aletheia said. But the reason I'm saying that is it's such a crucial part of the course that we've actually kind of now divided it, expanded it into kind of one unit itself, which is Rethink, really looking at the idea of rethinking, expanding your practice, but then also on a research-based way, but then also introducing a new project called the Research Project, which is a kind of link from Rethink to your major project. So in your summer term, in your third term on the full-time course, you start your major project. So that effectively means that your major project time goes from the whole of the summer term, then the break while you're away between the summer and when you come back for your last term, which is the autumn term again at the start of the following year. So you have 2 full terms and a holiday to make your major project. But in the summer term, you also make a research project where you are displaying kind of a research process which is going to underpin what you are going to go and work on for your major project. So we kind of have decided to devote a period of time to really develop a research structure, which is informing how you are thinking you're going to go and make the work for your major project over the summer, and to reflect on when you come back for your final major project term in the autumn, which is when, I mean, you still continue to make work in some cases, but that's really when you're then starting to look at what form your major project is going to take. So we've kind of now got this 3-part structure to the major project. The summer term, where you're developing the idea, you do your research project which underpins your thinking about what you're going to do. You go away, you make the work, then you come back, and your third term is really reflecting, editing, sequencing, deciding what the appropriate form is to use. Is it going to be a photography book? Is it going to be a picture story? Is it going to be a multimedia piece? Is it going to be an installation piece? So based on what you've done for your rethink and your collaborative unit, you are then making kind of very informed decisions about what is the appropriate way not only to make your work, but also to disseminate it, to show it, to communicate what it is you want to say to your audience. Aletheia.
Absolutely. So the major project on the online course, we have longer for the major project. So we have several more months to complete the major project. And I think it's really fascinating to consider how the research project will influence and, as Ed said, underpin the major project. And during the research project, we'll really be looking at how research underpins practice. So the beauty of this degree is that you are not pigeonholed as photographic makers, photographic artists, documentary makers, photojournalists. It's very much about finding your own voice and finding your own way through this course, and we kind of provide those safety nets around you. And then from there, it's up to you to explore and to really find your own voice and your own vision within these units. So the research project is will be a really interesting unit where you can delve into the research, which will give weight and substance to your major project. Now, coming out of the course, you may be very much practice-based, but having done a research project unit, you'll understand the importance of how this research plays into your practical component of your work. Some people will graduate from the course realizing actually they want to write about photography or they want to continue researching, while other people will come out of the course being very much involved in the physical making of work and will be very much committed to being a photographic practitioner or a photojournalist, very much embedded within the media. But all of these units will give you the experience to explore your own interests and your own passions, most importantly, and give you the fundamental understanding and the grounding to really delve into your own interests and your own passions, and to answer the questions that perhaps you have at the moment about what kind of a photographer you want to be, what kind of an artist you want to be, what kind of a person working in the media perhaps you want to be. So I think that is the beauty of finishing with the research project and then into the major project, which is supported by weekly tutorials on both courses, where you're supported by a range of tutors, and we'll go through those in a moment, who come from a diverse range of backgrounds, and you're supported and really encouraged to continually push your own horizon and challenge your own thinking and your own boundaries as well within your major project.
Yeah, so moving on to kind of how you experience these different units. For the in-college full-time course, there's a mixture of different ways in which you learn and which you share with people. There's lectures, there are some workshops, you have your practical assignments for the different units, your creative assignments, there are seminars, there's group tutorials, you have some study visits to look at particular bodies of work or meet particular photographers. There are guest lectures, there's the collaborative projects, and you have the opportunities to exhibit. You obviously have an exhibition at the end of the course, but there are opportunities through the year to have kind of work in progress exhibitions. I mean, the key kind of principle of how we operate the full-time MA, it's around the group experience. So, you know, we're all adults, we're all coming with our own expertise, our own life experience, and the principle of the course is that we learn by sharing. So basically everything you do will be on a group basis. So for each of the units, you will be working with a group of kind of 6 to 8 members of your cohort. They change from unit to unit. And the idea is that everyone kind of shares their work, they contribute ideas, they help each other with questions that each individual has about their work. And by everyone having that voice and having that chance to ask and contribute to other people, other people's projects, is that by doing that you start kind of unlocking your own mind. What are the questions you need to answer for your own work? What is it that's not resolved in your project? So that experience of talking, sharing, articulating is what really informs the group learning experience. It's not, yes, there are lectures, there are artist talks, but it's not really a case where we are telling you, we're not kind of giving you a formula of what you do to become a documentary photographer or a photojournalist. It's very much learning together and learning from each other. And that, I think, is kind of really a rich, it is a very rich experience. Yeah. Shall I go to the next slide, Aletheia?
Absolutely, that sounds good, Ed. Hopefully, yes, good. It is the one I was thinking it would be. Excellent. So following on from what Ed just said, which is in a way very similar to the way we structure the online course as well. The only difference, of course, being that we are not physically in the same room. We have students from all around the world. At the moment, I would roughly guess that about 40% of our students at the moment are UK or Europe based, and then from there we have students throughout the Middle East, Asia. We have several students in Australia, and we have quite a few students in the States and Canada as well. We try our best, I try my best to coordinate the timetable so that students from all around the world can access tutorials at a particular time or can access the recordings, as I said earlier, generally within the hours of a British working week, but I try to tailor it so that mornings or afternoons will coincide with a reasonable hour for whichever hour of the world you're living in at the moment. We teach all of our classes online, of course. We use a platform called BB Collaborate at the moment, which you can see online at the moment, which is an online learning platform. We share screens, we share computers, we share our work. We use video cameras, webcams rather, very much like this, so we can also hold up physical work. We have a very similar structure to the previous slide, which Ed just ran through, of workshops where we do practical workshops such as bookmaking or zine making. We just did a fabulous bookmaking workshop rather, using digital technology. So we have a camera that's pointing down onto the person who is teaching the workshop, and we taught stitching and editing and assembling in an online environment. So thanks to the online kind of learning experience being developed and changing more recently, we're now doing much more practical workshops as well on portraiture workshops, lighting, as I said, bookmaking also, which I think are really interesting practical components of the course, and which I plan and hope to introduce more of as we all become kind of more used to using our webcams and the online learning environment in different ways. So we have lectures where we invite guest lecturers in to speak about their work. We have lectures from our, fantastic, thanks Ed. So these are some of the people we have had in for our MAPJD lectures. We have a mixed lecture program. So Ed and I run the guest lecture program together, and we invite guest lecturers in to talk about their working practice. We always are really up to date with interesting photographers who are doing interesting projects at that particular time. And we do also keep in mind the cohort of students who the guest lecturers are speaking to, and really try to choose fascinating photographers of relevance to those particular cohorts as well. So people we have had in the past are on screen now. Crofton Black, obviously Gideon Mandel, just skipping through, Shoaib Malvern, Kalpesh Lathgira, Pulumi Basu, are some people that have come to give our online guest lectures. And in addition to this as well, we have photography program lectures, which are at the moment on a Wednesday afternoon. For those who are studying in person, it is in the lecture theatre. And those who are studying with me online, it is streamed live through Zoom, so you can access it through Zoom. It's also recorded, so you can access the recording later. and really fantastic and fascinating people are invited to come into the lecture room, and they give lectures about their own working practice. And we often have in-conversation evenings during these program lectures where Max, Ed, perhaps myself, or other members of the photography staff will present a guest lecturer. The guest lecturer will present their work for 30 to 40 minutes, and then we'll have a conversation with them around their presentation and around the work that they've just presented. Ed, would you like to add anything on that as well?
Yeah, I think, two things I would add. One is another kind of strand of the MAPJD lectures is we also have kind of quite recent alumni come and talk, former students come and talk. So one week you might be having a talk from someone who is like 2 years out of the MA, and they're talking about how they're making progress, how they develop their network, they're keeping in touch, the project with their own cohort, they're developing their own projects. They're working as a picture editor, they're making photographs for the Financial Times. You'll get that kind of level, but then you will also hear from Susan Maisalas or Nadav Kanda talking about people who have been working for decades, who are really kind of at the top of the world of photography and documentary photography. You'll have people like Shoaib Mavlian, who's just taken over the Photographers Gallery, also talking about their practice as a curator and an institution manager, someone who kind of is a gatekeeper in the world. So I can't kind of emphasize enough how rich these two lecture series are, and kind of what a range of different experiences you will get from doing this. I mean, I did a previous version of this course many years ago, and for me the lectures, the talks were, I think, possibly where I learned most, and just having that opportunity to talk to someone about how they funded a project, how they came up with an idea, how they got it placed somewhere, to be able to talk to different people at different stages of their career. I found a really rich learning experience. So, as Aletheia said, because we're because of our college having quite a good reputation, we can, and all the people who teach you are kind of really plugged into what's happening in a contemporary term. So we have people from the very top of the profession, people who have just launched books, who have just started exhibitions. You've got a very contemporary insight into what's going on through these lecture series. I think they're really important.
I agree, Ed, and I think it's really interesting for students as well to ask very practical questions as well as theoretical questions. For example, we had Dimitra Deed in last night, who was fantastic, and we were talking a lot about book publishing, and she shared with us very openly things around costing, around approaching people. So all of these things as well are covered in the guest lectures, and it's wonderful to see how practical they can be as well as theoretical. And I think there is great learning to be had during these guest lectures, without a doubt, which happen weekly during the teaching term.
Okay, so let's meet some of the people who you will learn with. So Aletheia, online tutors.
Absolutely. Okay, fantastic. So we have Paul Lowe, who lectures on our course. Paul actually started the course. He was the original founder of the course, and of the online course, I should say. Paul's background is in photojournalism. Paul's book, The Bosnians, was released, I believe, around 2010, and he's exhibited widely since then. Paul has a really deep and rich background in photojournalism and conflict photography, and so he really is somebody who taps into this experience, the lived experience of being a photojournalist, and shares this with the students. Paul's now turned his career more in an academic sense and in a research sense, so he also has that to add and to work with students from more of a research methodology at the moment. So we might go on to the next one, Ed. Lewis Bush was running the course previously. Lewis has a really fascinating practice where he combines different methods of working. You can see in this image, it's a cyanotype. Lewis's work really questions history, At the moment, he is doing a really fascinating book about the dark history of space exploration. Lewis's specialization, I would say, is in book publishing and zines. He's an extremely productive artist who produces books on a very regular basis, and also explores other ways of working in terms of pinhole photography, more straight photography, alternate processes, as we can see here, such as cyanotypes. And he teaches the history and theory unit, as well as the rethink unit and the final major project. We go on to the next one. Thank you. Leonie Hampton is one of your tutors for the Rethink unit and also the final major project unit. Both Lewis and Leonie are graduates of this degree, of this online degree, as am I. Leonie's practice is very much embedded in environmental work, and previously her major body of work coming out of this course was looking at mental health issues, in particular OCD disorder, and exploring the impact on the family surroundings. And now her work is placed very much into environmental studies. She recently had an exhibition titled The Language of Seeds, and she has recently exhibited at COP27. Thank you. Peter Fraser also lectures and tutors on our course. Peter worked with and travelled with William Eggleston many years ago, who had quite a profound impact, I believe, on Peter's practice. Peter is perhaps based more in an art practice, which I think is really important to talk about it at this particular point, to indicate how wide and how deep and rich the tutors we have on the course are in terms of experience and practice and theoretical research as well. Peter's practice is very much embedded, and he was one of the great founders of British colour photography. And Peter's work is exploration of the world around us. Peter exhibits frequently in London. His work is currently held at the Tate in London, and he exhibits frequently throughout the UK and Europe as well. And as I said at the beginning, he tutors on both the Rethink and the final major project, also alongside Leonie. Thank you. Thanks, Ed. Andrew Jackson is one of your tutors in the Photojournalism and Documentary Practice unit, which you begin at the start, the very beginning of the course. Andrew also teaches collaborative practices as well. His own practice is embedded in collaborative work, as well as editorial portraiture and other editorial commissioned work. So Andrew's a great person to speak to about collaborations, ethical representation, representations that the photographer, the questioning really of representations, and how the photographer positions themselves within the modern day context of documentary photography. Go on to Anders. Anders Berger also works on the photojournalism and documentary photography practical unit at the beginning of the course, and then also dips in and out for your final major project and at times the Rethink as well. Anders' work is very much embedded in the social positioning of a photographer and the social impact of photographic work. So he works with you a lot to really ask students to reflect and consider what they want their work to do, whether that be in galleries, whether that be in a broader social context, whether that be as an activist, whether that be in any other form. Anders is a person that is continually thinking and rethinking the place of photography in society and the role of photography within the world we live in. Thank you, Ed. Becky Warnock is our wonderful collaborative teacher. Becky also teaches on the full-time course, and Becky runs the collaborative unit. Becky's own practice is embedded in collaborative practices. Becky does really fascinating work, which is lens-based, but also moving photography. She collaborates with absolutely fascinating people and works a lot with teaching other courses, participatory programs, and really asking students to reflect on what is a collaborative practice to them and how they could bring collaboration into their own practice as lens-based artists, lens-based photographic practitioners. And a little bit about myself and my own work. As I said earlier on, I've been a photographic practitioner since I was very young, over 20 years now. My own practice is very much embedded in my homeland of Australia. I am now London-based, but interestingly enough, all of my own work is produced in Australia. My work really questions the dark history of colonisation in Australia and the impact that this has had on both First Nations Australians and other non-Indigenous Australians. I really reflect on how we can represent or re-represent history, how we have represented it in the past, both through oral and other visual means, and how we can rethink this way of representation and the impact that traditional ways of the representation of history has had on our cultural identity and on our personal identities. My work combines many techniques. I use film, large format cameras, so it's very much based in chemical processes. Interestingly enough, to offset that, I also had a separate career running alongside my photographic career as a multimedia artist, so as a visual journalist in the media for 20 years. So I would run these two streams of my career jointly until quite recently, and so I also have a background knowledge in editing, in visual journalism, and in technical programs such as After Effects and Photoshop as well, which I teach on the course also. So alongside the very much a chemical process where I very much hand make work from negatives, from large format negatives, looking at reworking, rethinking our way of representing history. I also have the other much more technical side, which makes for quite an interesting kind of holistic approach to photography. My interest is in exhibiting and publishing as well, so that's also something that that I teach alongside all of the other lectures within the units. Okay, Ed, I think we're probably pretty much through the online tutors.
Yep.
Now, it is worth saying that we do swap a little, and we do kind of do guest lectures across courses as well, which is a really nice kind of interchange of knowledge and experience as well.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just whiz through some of the key staff on the full-time course. There are sort of 4 permanent members of staff. So Max and myself are the key sort of members of staff that you will spend most of your time with. Then Becky Warnock, who you've just met, and David Birkin are also 2 permanent staff members. We have a whole range of associate lecturers who are they have their own outside work, but they come in and they teach on some of the specific units who will come across. But first of all, just a bit more about Max. I guess between myself and Max, we sort of span these 2 areas. Max has a very strong history and background in writing about photography and curating photography. So she writes regularly for key publications like 1,000 Words, for Granta. She also writes essays for kind of leading book projects like This History of Mary Ellen Malt, the famous photographer. She contributed a chapter to that work. She is kind of a leading critical thinker about photography, contemporary documentary photography and contemporary documentary practice. I guess, I mean, I have a fairly well-established practice across these 3 kind of main areas. I mean, my work around contemporary conflict and experiences of incarceration, I guess you could probably describe as part of the investigative aesthetics approach. I mean, my work is very much research-based. The way I make work for each subject is dependent on what I think is the relevant way of visualizing something, based on the research, based on the people I'm collaborating with, based on the people I've met, based on the places I've been Two, I have published 6 books myself with various publishers, both small imprints and leading publishers like Aperture. I'm working on 3 ongoing projects, which I'm hoping to bring to publication in the next 2 years. I have a well-developed kind of installation practice. I'm represented by commercial galleries, but I've also exhibited in museums like the Imperial War Museum in London or the International Centre of Photography Museum in New York. And really, when I do install my work, it's not putting pictures in frames on walls. It's very much looking for what is kind of the experience I'm trying to create for an audience in a space. So I use projection, moving image, installation forms, sculptural forms, wherever I think is kind of going to work in a space and is relevant to what it is that I'm trying to say. The great Becky Warnock, who is a leading kind of theorist in collaborative practice, the theory of collaborative engagement. This is a collaborative project she ran over the last couple of years, which came out in this book called The Terms of Engagement, which is a series of workshops with people looking specifically at different aspects of what can be understood as collaborative practice. David Birkin has a lot of experience in more kind of art-based work, I guess you would say, but he definitely looks to work in a public space. So he's had several bodies of work which take place in public. These are 2 examples from New York, where he worked with an artist to kind of, in a sense, kind of recontextualize digital advertising platforms to actually kind of put up work on those digital public spaces which are questioning the kind of products and how they are made that we typically see on those formats. And he did another body of work looking at kind of issues of law, which involved a plane flying across New York, towing a legal phrase, and the work was then documenting, recording how that spectacle was itself repeated by the public who saw it on social media. A few other examples, Tony Olmos, who works on the Photojournalism documentary photography unit, a kind of long-term practice working for The Guardian and The Observer as a portrait photographer and covering all the kind of the key events of key events of the news, which gets shown in editorial photography for a long period. Viv Gamble, curatorial practice. She runs Scene 15 Gallery in Peckham and is responsible and runs the Peckham 24 photography festival each year. Morag Livingston, who is an award-winning filmmaker and writer and is another alumni of the course. This is a film that she brought to the screen a few years ago, which won several awards and plaudits. Teos Damani, who is a photographic historian, who's just finished a book with Aperture looking at Black women photographers in Britain. Jamila Prowse, who has a practice based very much in diversity and inclusiveness, who you come across on the Histories and Theories unit in particular. Sunil Shah, who has a very developed archival practice. Roy Mehta, who is another leading documentary photographer. This is an example of his recent book about the community that he lived in Brent. And our program director, Daniel Alexander, the head of the photography program, who has a particular interest in book making and book design. So that's a brief overview of the kind of staff that you'll come across on the full-time course as well. Just spend a little bit of time talking about facilities which are available in college. The specialist photography facilities, we have black and white and colour dark rooms. There is digital C-type printing facilities available, inkjet printing. We have studios with fully up-to-date continuous and flash lighting. We also have a kit which is available from a kit room where you can get kind of location lighting kits and try different camera formats, medium format, large format, so you can kind of experiment with different formats for your work. There are negative scanners, so there is a lot of there are a lot of facilities and equipment available for you. The opportunities are there to use all these different facilities. Aletheia's kind of touched on the kind of workshops which are on offer. In college, you have the chance to access the different kinds of subjects which are covered by the different courses across the college. So you can do workshops in 3D printing, you can do workshops in particular types of photographic process, old chemical processes, you can experiment with photogravure, you can engage in bookmaking workshops. There's a whole range of things which are available to you, which are not actually part of the course, but which you can access and make the most of in your own time. We have a digital space where there's a whole desk after desk of the computers that you can access with a full range of digital softwares. There's a digital copy bureau, really high quality photocopying service. There's gallery spaces where you can also put on your own exhibitions if you'd like to. We have the library services with academic support there. It's a very well stocked library. You also have access to all the other UAL libraries. So if something isn't in the LCC library but is at Central St Martin's or at Camberwell, you can access those libraries and get the books through them. We have a very nice canteen and a cafe as well, which is an important part of the kind of cultural life as well, where you go and eat and share stuff. I think that's everything. I've slightly rushed through that, but Aletheia, do you want to kind of talk about that situation for online?
Absolutely. As most of you have probably realised while Ed was going through this, since we are online, we have different accesses, but we do not have access to the same kit room, for example, or studios. We do, however, have access in person and online to the library and to all of the libraries, as Ed just detailed. We also have our own dedicated librarian who is very happy to help students individually, and you can book sessions with our wonderful librarian Gavin, who also helps people to research and is also actually a really brilliant person to touch base with regarding things like artist books and zines. The LCC library is one of the largest holders and collectors of zines and also handmade photo books as well. So we do have access to all of those resources. We also have access to academic support. The name sounds rather dry, but actually academic support is a really wonderful team of often artistic based or creative based and research based academics who help and support students to articulate ideas, to write critical reports, to write critical reflections and proposals. And we have access to our own dedicated academic support person who also gives lectures and tutorials and workshops around working methodologies of particular research methodology, putting together critical reports, writing proposals, these kinds of things. So we have access to that area, which is incredibly useful and which many students utilize as well.
Yeah, the two other things I've realised are not on this list is because of the tradition of LCP as the London College of Printing. There's a fantastic archive of book printing possibilities. There's actually a Heidelberg press in LCC. It is kind of possible to actually print a book, an offset litho printing process at LCC. And there's also an amazing archive. So, for example, part of the Stanley Kubrick archive is based at LCC. So you can make appointments to go and visit the archive and look at what is available and use that as a resource for your own research as well. And in fact, on the collaborative unit this year, one of the groups has actually been kind of looking at the Kubrick archive and making collaborative work based around his archive at LCC. So, other information. What can I tell you? The Postgraduate Hub. So there is a postgraduate kind of community at LCC and across UAL, which gives you a chance to meet students on other courses. You get access to careers and employment advice, teaching and learning support and guidance. There are specific postgraduate events which take place. There's even the possibility of you can get access to funding opportunities, small amounts of money to kind of put on postgraduate exhibitions or make small publications. So LCC is very much, and UAL, developing a postgraduate platform, a hub where you can kind of share with postgraduate students across the college and the university. There is an industry mentoring scheme which connects postgraduate students with professionals in their particular field. And there's also a kind of a peer mentoring scheme where former students come back and you can have mentoring relationships with people who are kind of 2-3 years or slightly longer down the line of developing their own practice and careers after completing the MA. So we try to create a support network as you transition from the college into the outside world.
I think as well, I was just going to add there as well, Ed, I think it's really important as well to note that many of the both online and face-to-face students do arrange catch-ups and meetups while they're studying, but also once they've finished the course. I know currently my first years often meet up for those that are UK based, and I know that some students organise to meet at photography festivals. For example, in Arles in the south of France, there's a wonderful photography festival at the beginning of July each year, and students often meet there and arrange to meet from the online course. At least that might be the first time in person that they've arranged to meet, but they do often arrange these fantastic meetups. So even though the online course doesn't have physical in-person meetups on a weekly basis, students do very often take it into their own hands to meet up in person, and they actually provide an incredible network of support and encouragement and motivation while you're a student and then post-graduation as well. Also for the online course, we have social rooms within our online learning environment that students are encouraged to utilize and to meet up in a social environment without lecturers present, where they're encouraged to talk about ideas, current photography trends, exhibitions, festivals, things like that that they might have seen or heard, or inspirations that they've come across. So there is that social impact, that social aspect rather to the online course, which is obviously different to the full-time, but I think it's also worth mentioning.
Sure. Okay, I think I'm aware that we've been going for an hour now, which is probably a bit too long. Maybe, so this is kind of the what you do to apply. I mean, I would imagine that quite a few will have questions about this, but this is what you need to do when you make an application. You have to share obviously personal details, your current previous education, employment history, CV, and then kind of the personal statement, the portfolio, the project proposal, and the video task are all part of what we ask you to do. So we ask you to write a few hundred words about why you're interested in photography, in documentary practice, in this particular course, the online or the full-time version. Share a portfolio of your images and think of a project you would like to make work about, and explain kind of why and how you would do it, and maybe kind of some of the references behind your research for that. We don't hold you to that. We don't expect that that's what you're going to do as your major project. It's literally just to kind of get a sense of how you think and what kind of subjects you're interested in, and then a short video task where we ask you to talk about something in your portfolio, a project from your portfolio or your proposal, just to get a sense of kind of how you articulate what it is that you're interested in doing. We can come back to questions on that, I think, if you have any. So let's just go to, the portfolio. Collection of work showing how your creativity has developed. I think it's often good to show a portfolio which demonstrates maybe a sort of sustained engagement with the subject. I mean, yes, the course is photojournalism and documentary photography, and if you've got a really strong portfolio of single pictures, that's great. But it's also kind of interesting also to see how people represent a sustained engagement with a project visually. Okay, I don't think there's anything. I mean, Aletheia, I think we should just crack on and get to the end and then deal with questions.
I agree. I think we'll probably have quite a lot of questions. So let's let's just go through to the end and take some questions.
Yeah, so then if you do have questions after this, these are Aletheia's details. That's Aletheia's email and some other emails that you can go to for general inquiries, lcc.contact, for student support, and the admissions emails there for international applicants and UK and EU applicants. And there's some more similar kind of information for the online course. Max's email, my email, again, the general inquiries, some information about accommodation if you're looking to find out about that in advance, student support with a rogue S, okay, got that line broken. Some information about funding, and again, the UK and international emails as well. I'm sure you can find all these available via admissions as well if you want to get that detail. Okay, the end. Thank you for your patience.
Lovely, thank you very much both. We do have some questions. So obviously some of these will have different answers depending on the mode of delivery of the course. So I don't know if you want to sort of hand back to each other. But to start, what is the typical cohort size for the online course?
The typical cohort size at the moment is 25 students actually on both years. So 25 in my first year group and also 25 in my second year group at the moment. This, I would say, can go either up and down by 5. So we have had cohorts actually even up to 35 students, but we also have cohorts of around 20 students as well. So my estimation is that generally it's between 20 and 30 students for the online course.
Great, and out of interest, Ed, what's the cohort size for the in-person course generally?
It's around 30. At the moment, it's 25. Last year, it was more. So it kind of varies, but it's around 25 to 30 ideally.
Lovely, thank you very much. Another question. I'm interested. Is there a studio and black room time where we're taught more about the media using these equipment and materials? So that might be a question for you, Ed.
Yeah, so at the start of the year, you have induction workshops, which the technical staff organise. So in order to use the studio or the black and white and the colour darkrooms, you have to have the induction in order to do that. And once you've had that induction, then you book your own time and you go in and you use those facilities. But there is always technical staff there, and the technical staff are fantastic. And will help you if you have specific questions. The technical staff also organise workshops in specific processes, or for example, they have had one on making video on a phone. They are also, a lot of the technical staff are former students or they're practitioners in their own right. So you get a really rich and valuable experience and input from them as well. But yeah, there are all sorts of different courses and inductions available for the facilities.
Great, thank you. Next question, what kind of photo and/or journalism experience do students tend to have before starting their MA?
Is this for one or the other, or both courses?
Both courses, why not?
Well, I'll jump in, Ed. I have a huge range of current students. I have current students who have previously worked in human rights law, to students that work or have worked in scientific fields, neuroscience, for example, as well. I have somebody who was a neuroscientist, to people that work in the media as well. So personally, for the online course, I am not looking for one type of student. I think a cohort is always the most inspiring and inclusive and fascinating and wonderful when it's made up of great diversity of backgrounds and experience and knowledge and people. And so really we're looking for a very wide range of students from very diverse backgrounds, actually. So I would encourage everybody to apply who's interested, because even if you haven't had specific photojournalism experience, it doesn't mean that you're not right for the course. And the beauty of the course is that you're not pushed in one direction or another. You may end up being incredibly interested in photojournalism, or you may end up deciding that your practice is much more documentary based, or you actually may end up understanding or realizing that your practice is very much based in more of what may be considered an art base or a multimedia base, but which is narrative led, which from our understanding and our definition of documentary still absolutely fits the documentary genre when it has this narrative and research to underpin the work. And what about you, Ed?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. We have a very diverse range of backgrounds to the cohort and ages as well. So, you know, we have someone on the course at the moment who's 65. In their 60s, we've had someone who is a retired judge. We have people who are just out of their BA. We have people at all sorts of different stages through their careers and through their lives. And you don't have to have a highly developed photographic practice. We're more interested in what you have to offer, what your research background is, what your life experience is, how open you are to kind of exploring and experimenting on the course. I mean, yes, we do have people who are working professionally as photographers. We do have people who are kind of working as editorial photographers who come on the course, but the course is not going to teach you necessarily how to take a conventionally beautiful photograph. We are more interested in your ability to make work which says something. So, you know, some of the strongest major projects at the end of the course are made by people who are not naturally the most gifted photographers or have the most experience of photography, but they find a subject and they find the way to make the work about that subject, which is just conceptually really powerful, and they make a really strong body of work. So yeah, don't worry about being a very experienced photographer or not. It's more about you and what you have to say.
Great, thank you both. Can online students attend artist lectures in person if they are in London?
Unfortunately, they can't, because we like to keep it equal for all students who are studying on the online course. So unfortunately, when you are an online student, all of the classes are kept online, just to keep it fair for those people who are also online students but who don't have access and aren't able to come into London. We do, however, have an in-person exhibition at the end of the course, as Ed also has on the full-time course. So that is an opportunity as well for people to meet in person once they've finished their degree and to exhibit in London. So right at the end of the course, there is a final exhibition of your final major project, which is held at a gallery in London. And so you do have the opportunity to also meet some of the other full-time students at that point and to exhibit your work to the public in London.
Great, thank you. And another question for you both here, I think. What if we are relatively new to photography and we don't have a portfolio? Are there strict criteria about the number of pictures we need to provide, and can they be taken with a phone, for example?
I don't think there are strict guidelines on the number of photographs. I'm trying to remember now if I've got anything on that slide which says how many images. I think when you go onto the platform to upload your portfolio, I think you'll find more information there about photographs. I mean, obviously, the more you can show us, the better. Work made with a phone, I don't have a problem with that. That's fine. It's more kind of what you're pointing at rather than the technology you're using. That's not a problem at all. I think, obviously the more images you can show us and the more kind of engagement you can show of looking at a particular subject, the better we'll get an impression of what you're interested in and how you're thinking visually. So I would encourage you to kind of, don't just put a couple of images up, show us more, because we'll get a better idea of what it is you do and why you do it.
Absolutely. I would say exactly the same as Ed. It's absolutely more important how you are thinking, how you are conceptually considering the world around you, how you might consider telling a story or are telling a story, so the narrative behind it, things around sequencing, but it's often it is very much about the idea and about the engagement with the subject as well. That's incredibly important. I think it's important to not necessarily illustrate an idea. Obviously, that's something we go into on the course a lot, but to actually engage with the narrative that you're exploring and that you're documenting. So while, of course, the visuals do play a part, they're not the only important aspect, and we're very much interested in considering how you think, how you put together work, and your idea, your conceptual thought process in this case.
Great, thank you. Another question for you, Aletheia. I'm interested in the online course, but I'm concerned that opportunities for networking aren't as strong as the in-person course. Is that the case?
I wouldn't say so. I did the online course myself. So I was actually based in Sydney when I did the online course. So I finished 8 years ago. I graduated 8 years ago. And since then, while I was doing it, I actually made a lot of contacts through things like Instagram, which is an incredible way to make contacts actually, and also through the lectures. All of your lecturers are working photographers, so everybody who I ran through with you a little earlier, all of those tutors and lecturers are working in the media, whether it's through exhibiting their practice or actually working for places like myself. I worked for 20 years for the BBC, The Guardian, Financial Times, these kinds of clients. So your lecturers are wonderful contacts. And then network opportunities do come up through attending things like portfolio reviews. At the end of the Masters, you are given the opportunity to do portfolio reviews with a range of reviewers. And what I would advise additionally is to try to get to things like festivals or try to get to exhibitions in your local area, because actually it may be your local contacts that serve as the best contact anyway, rather than if let's say you are based somewhere in the States, maybe that is where you want your contacts, your networking to happen rather than in London. So like everything in life, there are pros and cons, but we are aware of that, and we really do try and kind of open up that world of networking. For example, we have one of our tutors on the course at the moment is Emma Balkit, who's the director of photography for the Financial Times Weekend magazine. So Emma's one of your weekly tutors. So you meet with Emma every week, for example. So people like this you have access to on the course, and then other people that are also working in the media as well. Currently, 3 of our current students are also working in the media as cameramen and editors, so you also have access to the other students, so that ends up being a great networking opportunity for you as well.
Great, thank you. Last couple of questions then, as we're coming up on time. So I would assume this is for both courses, this question. Apart from the mentorship and in-course support systems, is there any kind of formal training within the course to help students successfully establish themselves in the industry as a graduate, whatever industry that may be?
I'm not quite sure what that question's getting at. I mean, how can I say it? This course will not guarantee you to leave the course and get a job working for AP or Reuters or Getty or something like that. We do have photographers, former students who have done that. I think I'll say 2 things. One, I think there are kind of 3 key components to what you get from both courses, but certainly for the in college course, which is you have a strong element of professional practice through the lectures, that the people who come and talk to you about their practice and their careers. There are practical workshops on specific areas of kind of technical stuff like location lighting. There's talks about grant writing. There's talks about working in the art market, how to get work. So there's a key element of sort of professional practice. There's a key element of academic practice as well, which is how you theorize your work, how you contextualize it in relation to existing field of body of work about that particular subject, how that subject has been written about, how you place your work in relation to what's been done before. So you have to kind of demonstrate and develop that form of academic side of what goes on. Then there's the creative side, which is where we really do encourage you to experiment and to experience what it is like to delve into subjects in great depth and to find what it is you want to say and to understand why you are the person to say that, or to understand the problems implicit in why you are saying something about a subject. So that's what I think you get in terms of the three key elements of preparing you for a career. But above all, I would say you get the opportunity to take time to really find what it is that you think about the world, how you understand the world, and what you think is important and what you want to say about that. I mean, this will sound like a bit of a cliche, but this is a life-changing experience. It changed my life when I did it. It transformed the way I understand the world, how I look at it. I think that is probably the most valuable thing you get from this course. It's just having that time out, that time to yourself to engage in something really intense, where you will come out a different person, looking and thinking differently at the end of it. So yes, there is a kind of an element of you'll get training to, you'll get an introduction to the skills, the personal skills, the technical skills, the thinking skills you need to get on in documentary photography, but it doesn't guarantee you a job, but it will certainly give you an experience which will mean you have a much richer understanding of what it is you want to say about the world.
I think you said it beautifully, Ed, and really, I think you said it pretty much perfectly. I think the only thing I would add is, very much like Ed, the course completely changed my life as well, and it solidified what I wanted to do in the industry. And I think that's what the course does best. It makes you reflect and consider and think so deeply about your own practice and what kind of a photographer you want to be and what you want to make work about, that ultimately then you have the passion and the commitment to go into the world and do something with that work. So as far as things like internships or doing work experience in actual in actual places, we encourage that and support that, but that's not a part of the course. But what it does do, it changes you as a person, as Ed said, and it changes your practice. So you know where you want to go in the world and where you want to be in the world. And I think as photographers, that's a very difficult thing to understand. And that's often what holds people back, is that they don't quite know what they want to do or what is important to them and what they want to talk about photographically. So this course absolutely clarifies your vision, but both courses, they clarify your vision of where you want to go in the world. And I think that is really the best thing that you can get from any master's degree.
That's great. Thank you both. I should also say that LCC as an institution has a lot of employment support services. So things like CV workshops and interview training as well. So we do offer that for all students. Very last question, and I realise there are more questions in the chat, but unfortunately we do have to draw it to a close. So perhaps if you are still interested, perhaps you could email Aletheia or Ed with your questions. But last question, and this is maybe more for Ed, but Aletheia, perhaps you could also advise on for online students as well. Is there an allowance for materials, i.e. printing, darkroom, paper, film, etc.? So I guess it's sort of providing materials out of your own money.
Yeah, unfortunately, there isn't a kind of allowance for students in that respect, but you do get stuff at a very competitive rate. That's for sure. I mean, things, you know, the copy bureau is incredibly cheap. The digital printing is certainly cheaper than commercially available. You also have access to these facilities in the other colleges as well. So, for example, Chelsea College of Art has just set up its own colour digital printing facility, which was actually, I don't know if any of you are aware of this place called Print Space in Shoreditch, which is where you can go and you book a computer and you go and print your own stuff. But the people who set that up have set this place up in Chelsea, which I believe is even more competitive than the LCC rates. So yeah, we can't give you an allowance, sadly, but you get access to a lot of facilities at a much better rate than you would do in the outside world.
Mm. And I think, as you said, Miranda, that was very much directed towards Ed, but we can also use the same printing facility at Chelsea, which is incredibly competitive and a really great printer. And one of our graduates, Alex Schneiderman, does a lecture for us every year, or may even do more, on post-processing, print production, print-ready files, because he has runs and manage Flow Photographics, which is one of the leading photographic printing houses in London. So we also offer those kinds of practical advice on how to do print ready files as well.
I'm happy to continue answering questions if we're allowed to continue answering. I mean, I don't know, is there a time slot we have to finish by a certain?
There is, I'm afraid. So yeah, it will have to draw us to a close. But yeah, as I did say, please get in touch with Ed or Aletheia via their emails, but also via any of the emails on the slides to direct your queries. But yes, thank you very much, both of you, for your time, and for everyone else watching at home as well. Thank you for watching. I will now draw the session to a close. So thank you very much.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Very much. Thanks for coming.